Hi, I'm Sophie Wilden. I'm the Child Health Programme Manager for Medway Public Health, and I will be presenting this workshop on puberty and growing up. In this session, we will be learning about the physical and the emotional changes which take place during puberty and how they may affect our children and our children's relationships, and certainly the relationships between parent and child during the time of puberty and adolescence. Puberty is the time when children begin to become adults, so they go through adolescence. So during that time, we have what's known as the adolescent brain development, which we'll look at further on in this session. They will experience many physical changes and many emotional changes. The changes don't happen all at once, but over time, and they can happen at different times for different children, and we'll look at those ages and stages in a moment. It's really important that you let your children know that these changes are normal. Everyone experiences these changes, and even if they're worried about them, that's okay. They can hopefully talk to you and you'll feel confident to talk to them about those physical and emotional changes. It's important to let them know what to expect so it's not scary. They can feel prepared, and hopefully after this session you'll be prepared too. I think it's really important for us as parents and carers to remember what puberty was like for us. If you're able, some of us didn't have a great time, and that might be a difficult thing to try and remember. Others maybe just remember it being a bit embarrassing, or a bit awkward, or feeling a bit anxious about the changes. Some of us may have loved puberty and enjoyed that part of growing up and our bodies changing and that adolescent development. So I think it's a good tip really for parents and carers to think about what was puberty like for you? At what age did you start experiencing puberty? How did you feel? How were the adults around you? How were you supported? What worked for you? What did you find really helpful? And those things can help you to support your children. So what age does puberty start? Well, the answer is that it's different for all children. Your children may follow the pattern that you follow, so they may begin puberty at a similar age to you, or they may not. And both of those is absolutely fine. So often for girls, it can start between the age of 8 and 13, and often for boys between 9 and 14. And I know that for some of you that might sound a little bit young, but there are lots of cases where children are starting puberty at the younger age. And that's why education is so important for children, so that they're prepared and not scared by the bodily changes that happen to them. So what we know at the moment is the average age of puberty, the start of puberty, is 11 for girls and 12 for boys. But that's not to say that any of those ages is fine. So any of those ages would be a healthy development. If your child was much older, so 15, 16, they hadn't yet started puberty, you may want to speak to your GP, so your doctor, and kind of investigate that. But really, children can start at a range of ages. So what causes the start of puberty? Well, it's hormones within the brain that trigger puberty, and those hormones are little messengers, and they tell the body what to do and how to start changing. So in male bodies, the hormones tell the testicles to make the hormone testosterone and sperm. So we'll talk about those body changes further on in the session, but things like erections, wet dreams, things like that are common for boys during puberty. And then in females, the hormones tell the ovaries to make the hormone estrogen, and that triggers the growth and release of eggs. So girls are already born with all of the eggs that they'll have within their lifetime within their ovaries, within the body, but puberty tells them that those eggs need to start being released, and that's when menstruation starts. And again, we'll look at that a bit further on in this session. We've already begun to talk a little bit about the physical changes that take place during puberty, but they are only one element of the changes that your child will experience through the adolescent growth. So we will have the brain development, so adolescent brain development, which we'll look at a bit further on in the session. There will be the emotional changes, and you will certainly notice those as your child goes through puberty, so often referred to as mood swings and being a bit grumpy or over emotional. But if you can remember back to when you were going through puberty, it can be quite a challenging time, and certainly in today's modern world with the pressures that children have around the internet, social media, etc., it can be difficult for them to regulate their emotions, especially when they're being flooded with hormones. And then the physical changes. So, They can be exciting, they can be scary, they can feel a bit embarrassing. So, lots of emotions there that your children will experience. And then the social changes. You will find that children begin to want to become more independent, will have more of their own idea about the world around them, and develop stronger feelings and stronger relationships. Can you list all of the changes that happen in puberty? So thinking about the physical changes and the emotional changes and potentially the social changes. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. So as I said earlier on in the session, we will look at brain development and adolescent brain development during puberty. So I think this video is really useful, so I'll play this for you now.
Between childhood and adulthood, our hormones kickstart a phase of significant change. And while the physical changes of adolescence may be obvious, less visible are changes that these hormones trigger in our brains, which might just be responsible for turning our teenage years into a bit of a roller coaster. Throughout our lives, our brains undergo a process called neural pruning. The synapses through which our neurons communicate are either lost or strengthened, depending on how much we use them. Well-used synapses grow strong, while the weaker ones fade away. It's this process that makes us capable of faster, clearer, and more complex thought as we grow up. But, crucially, pruning happens at different rates in different areas of the brain. By the time we're adolescents, the neural networks that communicate emotion, risk and reward are well developed, while others, which may help us to plan, prioritise, think logically and moderate our social behaviour, are yet to mature. So, a potential mismatch between our emotion and our judgment arises just as our emotional and social worlds are becoming more complex, making an increase in social anxiety quite normal at this time. Researchers at the University of Oxford want to know how this might affect our behaviour as we progress through our teenage years. In a recent study, they focused on the social worries many of us feel as adolescents. When presented with photographs of ambiguous social scenes and asked to imagine themselves in the picture, anxious younger teens were more likely than others to perceive negativity. But while these heightened emotions and the struggle to control them can make adolescence a difficult time for some, it's also a golden time for learning and growth. The adolescent brain is particularly agile and flexible, and as such, it's especially open to new opportunities, new technologies, and new experiences. So while our teenage years may feel pretty weird, they're also pretty wonderful. To explore how your brain develops, visit www.oxfordsparks.ox.ac.uk and tell us what you think on our Facebook and Twitter.
So I find that video really useful and informative, and I hope you do too. The social changes of puberty are just as important and potentially more important than the emotional and physical changes that take place for our children. You may notice several changes within your children in terms of identity. So they may want to try out new looks or try new friendship groups and change their music styles. Some children may not. Again, that's absolutely fine. It really is a time of exploration for children. You will likely notice that they want to become more independent. They want to do more things for themselves, by themselves. Maybe want to stay out later, go out a bit further alone than they did before. And again, that's all perfectly normal. And that can be tricky to manage within the family dynamic and within your relationships. And that's perfectly normal. Communication is key for these changes for you and for your children. In terms of responsibility, they may wish to take on more responsibility. You may wish them to take on more responsibility within the home, things like chores or making sure they're a bit more responsible for their own homework and things like that. Again, perfectly normal and natural and an important part of development for our children. New experiences is really common, and during the time of adolescent brain development, children's brains are flooded with hormones and chemicals and dopamine and serotonin, and that means that their brains are programmed to take risk. That's how they learn. And as worrying, as frustrating as that can be for us as parents and carers, that again is a perfectly normal part of puberty and growing up. During puberty, your child is likely to develop stronger values and morals. They may question things a bit more than they did before. They may have a stronger sense of right and wrong and social and moral justice, and that's perfectly normal. And this may be something that develops within their peer group or within their own mind, and that's again all perfectly normal. Talking about friendships and peer groups, they will start to have a big influence on your child, and your child will have a big influence on their peer groups and friendship groups too. And this is perfectly normal. So during the time of puberty, we know that for teenagers, their friendship groups become a real focus. So those relationships are really important to them. And sometimes the importance can take over the importance of those relationships with the family. Not always, but again, that's perfectly natural, and that's part of that adolescent brain development and them exploring risk and how they feel about others and themselves. Things like their appearance could be influenced, music taste, as we talked about before, their views on the world around them. This is also a time when children will start exploring their sexual identity, so potentially who they like, who they're attracted to, who they're not attracted to, how they feel about themselves in that way, how they will present themselves to those around them. All of that is perfectly normal, and it's really important that your children are given a safe space to explore those parts of themselves and who they are. Also, the media, we know, is a massive influence on children and young people, and certainly during puberty. And often children and young people will look to the internet, social media, to find out things to support them with the changes that they're going through. The best way to protect them is to ensure that they understand internet safety, and that you do too. During puberty, it's really likely that your child will experience big moods and big feelings, and that's okay. That's the normal part of children learning how to manage their emotions and identify their feelings and what to do with those feelings. There can be lots of excitement, lots of anger, lots of sadness, frustration, lots of happiness, lots of low mood, and it can switch throughout the day, and that's again absolutely normal. While their bodies are changing, their adolescent brains are developing, there's lots going on with the hormones and chemicals within the brain that leads to these big swings in emotion, mood and feeling. One of the biggest things that parents notice, and children as well, during puberty is the decision making. And sometimes as parents and carers, we feel that sometimes the decision making of our children is a bit off. And sometimes they can take risks and make decisions that don't make sense to us, but that's a really important part of the learning process. They're still learning consequence to action, even if they understand something is wrong, and they might not they might not know that they might not know that they should do it. That's okay. They're still learning. If I do this, this happens. So they do understand, but on a deeper level, maybe they don't fully understand. You're there to, as their parents and carers, to help guide them through that process, but know that that is a normal part of growing up. So earlier on in the session, I asked you if you could list the emotional and physical changes that take place during puberty. Well, you can see on your screen now several of the changes that will take place for children going through puberty. So there may be ones that you know, maybe some that you don't, but those are the most common changes there. So things like voice changing, getting deeper. You might notice your children start to sweat more, and we'll talk about the importance of personal hygiene in a little while. Hair starts growing around the genitals. They may grow taller. Girls' hips widen. Boys' shoulders get broader. Boys may experience wet dreams and spontaneous erections, and girls may start their periods. Nipples change. Your skin can change. So children going through puberty could end up with spots, things like that. Sometimes not. They might be lucky. But yeah, so on the screen there are the main changes in terms of physical changes that happen during puberty. Periods and wet dreams are some of the biggest changes that can happen to a child during puberty, and can cause sometimes worry and embarrassment. That's natural. It's a big change to their body and how they feel about themselves and their body, and it's not something that they're used to. So it's really important for them to learn about this in a safe way. So children do learn about periods, so menstrual cycle and wet dreams, during their times in school. So often that starts in primary school, and then they'll recap this in secondary school. But it's really important, if you can, to have those conversations with your children at home to prepare them for these changes. So as adults, many of us know about the menstrual cycle, so what happens to the body when you have periods, but many of us don't, or some of us know a little bit, and that's okay. This is the reason we're all here to learn together. So I'm going to play you this video now, which I hope will explain this to you in a great way. And this is a great video
A
that you can
period
share
is a
with
part
your
of the
children
menstrual
to
cycle
keep you
when a
busy.
person with a uterus bleeds for a few days. So, roughly once a month, an egg will leave one of the ovaries and travel down the fallopian tube to the uterus. The uterine walls will thicken in preparation for the fertilised egg, but if a sperm doesn't meet the egg, then womb lining will leave the body as a period, lasting roughly 3 to 8 days. The egg is about the size of a small grain of sand, and if it's not fertilised, it will just be reabsorbed by the body. You'll lose between 3 and 5 tablespoons of blood in your period, although some people may bleed more heavily than this. A period is generally red in colour, although lighter periods may appear to be pink or brown or even black. Most people will start their periods around the age of 12, although some people will start them as early as 8 or as late as 16, and the period will continue until the menopause, which happens in the late 40s or early 50s.
So hopefully you find that video as helpful as I did. Yep, so lovely quick explanation there of the menstrual cycle and what happens during that process. There are now several items that can be used during the menstrual cycle. So we have traditional items like period pads, or sometimes sanitary towels they're called, but I prefer period pads, just a preference. So period pads, they're sticky pads, absorber pads that go into the underwear and absorb the blood that leaks out through the vagina. Easy to use, can be disposed of easily. Similar to tampons, so tampons work in a slightly different way, so they're an absorbent product that is inserted into the vagina, absorbs the blood loss during the menstrual cycle, again, can be removed easily and disposed of easily. Period pants are a slightly newer item that's there to support people during their period. So the lining, the central bit of the period pants, is absorbent. So people using those won't necessarily have to worry about using a period pad or a tampon. The special lining would absorb the blood in a similar way that a pad does. They can be taken off, washed and reused. So a great new product there to support people on their periods. A lot of young people are environmentally conscious, which is amazing. They're thinking about climate change and their responsibility and their part within that. So to support that, there are reusable sanitary pads or period pads, I prefer. They're available from lots of places. You can Google reusable pads and lots of options will come up. So they work in the same way as the other pads. They're just reusable. So they're made from lovely material. They can be used, put in the underwear. They absorb the blood from the menstrual cycle, and then once used, you can take them off and wash them and reuse them. Fantastic. So another menstrual cycle product is the menstrual cup, so often known as the moon cup, and as it suggests, it's a little cup shape, so it's made of silicone usually, and that's inserted up into the vagina. It sits just below the cervix, as you can see there on the diagram, and that would collect the blood that's released during the menstrual cycle. They can be taken out, emptied, washed and reused. So again, environmentally friendly, save you money in the same way that the reusable pads do. They may take a little bit of getting used to when trying these products for the first time, but again, another great option. Wet dreams are a perfectly normal part of puberty and growing up, and many boys will experience them throughout the adolescent changes. So this is a helpful video that I'm going to play for you now that'll explain a little bit about what they are.
A wet dream is the way the male's body gets rid of excess sperm when it's not being used to make a baby. His testicles are producing millions of sperm every day, and sometimes there's too much sperm for the testicles to hold. A wet dream is his body's natural way of getting rid of this excess sperm.
Short and sweet, but hopefully you found that explanation useful. Personal hygiene is really important. It's important for our health, it's important for our well-being. During puberty, you may notice that your children smell a bit more sweaty, or they're becoming a lot more hairy, they're growing hair around their genitals, or their arm and leg hair may become more hairy. It's really important to talk to your children about personal hygiene, about keeping their bodies clean during this time. It helps with things like spots and oily skin, can help keep them smelling fresh if they're a bit sweaty, from those changes in puberty. Also, it's a good time to talk about social pressures and things like body hair. So often a lot of girls will want to, and sometimes boys will want to start shaving and shave their legs or shave the hair around their genital area. A lot of that is around social pressures. That can be things that they see on social media or within their peer group, or it could just be personal preference. That's what feels more comfortable to them. So it's important to have those conversations and let them lead what they would like to do with their body. It's their body and they need to feel comfortable within it. Masturbation can be a tricky topic for some of us to talk about and for others not at all, and that's great. I would just say that masturbation can increase within puberty, and so some of that is around hormones and sexual desire, but often it's around comfort, and often younger children will have their hands around their genitals, and that's about comfort and not sexual desire. And all of those things are perfectly okay. It's really important though to establish public and private places with your children and to not let them feel shamed if they are masturbating. It's a perfectly normal experience. It's a perfectly normal way of exploring who they are and what's going on for them when their sexual feelings are aroused during puberty. I understand it may be a slightly embarrassing topic for some of you. There are lots of resources to help you have those conversations, and at the end of the session I'll show you some resources that can help you to have those conversations. But really, it's a perfectly normal part of growing up. As we have been exploring and gaining understanding about puberty, we understand that supporting your child is really important. Puberty can be a really challenging time for them, but also for you. And it's really important to remember it's okay if your child feels awkward or embarrassed or uncomfortable, or if you do too, or if having these conversations makes you feel a bit like that. Some of us don't. Some of us feel, completely at ease, and that's amazing, absolutely fantastic. And some of us need that little bit of encouragement, and that's okay. So the more you have those conversations, hopefully the easier it'll become. But as I said, it's okay if it feels a bit weird. It's also okay if your child has no idea about puberty or at the moment doesn't really want to discuss puberty. Although I will say it's important that they are prepared for the changes that happen with puberty. So even if they might not want to talk to you about them, to find another safe adult they could talk to, or to learn in another way. So as I said earlier, they will learn in school. Most children will learn in school, but there are other things they can look at. So there are child-friendly websites that they can access, leaflets and things like that that you could look at together, or you could support your child to access if they didn't feel comfortable to talk to you. All of those options are okay. It's also okay if your children wants to ask you questions. They're asking questions they want to know and they need to know. They're asking for a reason. And again, it's okay if you don't always know the answer. There's lots of support and advice out there. Hopefully this session will help you feel a little bit more empowered to answer those questions. But again, it's okay to say to your child, actually, I'm not sure. Let's find out together, or I'll come back to you with an answer. It's really important for children and young people experiencing puberty to have a safe person to talk to, a safe adult, and it's wonderful if that can be you. And to do that, you need to be what I refer to as an askable adult. So being open, being honest, and being approachable to a child when they have questions around anything really, but particularly around puberty and growing up. It's also okay if this person isn't you. We all have different experiences growing up, different attitudes and values, and it may be that actually you find this stuff a bit difficult to talk about, so there may be somebody else within your family that could be that askable adult. So don't feel bad about that, that's okay. Equally, if you are here because you want to learn and you are going to be the askable adult, that's amazing. So I would say think about how you feel about the things that you're going to talk about. What's your own attitudes, values and experience? What will you be bringing to the conversation with your child? Certainly around things like love and sex, they can be quite big conversations. Be sure you understand what the child is asking. My top tip would be always bounce the question back. Oh, okay, what do you think about that? What's your understanding of that? And you kind of get where they're at and how much information they need, and you'll have an idea of what's an age appropriate answer for them in terms of what they're asking. Make sure that any information that you share with your children, so your experience and information is quite important, but also factual knowledge and things to support those conversations. And there's lots of services out there to support you, lots of websites, and we'll go through those at the end of the session. It's really important to use correct terminology for body parts, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but that helps safeguard your children and it helps everybody understand what you're all talking about. So I would say talk with your child, not to your child. This is a really big deal for them. They're experiencing something massive. You are too, and you are there to share that with them and guide them and support them, but it has to be what's right for them in terms of these conversations and when they're asking questions. And if you can, answer the question when they ask you. And as I said before, it's okay if you're unsure and you need to come back to them. But above all, just breathe and you'll be okay. You may feel unsure of when it's the right time to have the talk, the conversation. I would say let's not treat it as a talk. It's important to have these conversations throughout childhood, and if you can, certainly when children experience puberty, thinking about your experiences. How were you told about the changes of puberty? Were you told? What was your experience? What was useful for you? So yeah, rather than sitting down with your child and saying, right, we must have the talk. let's make it a regular part of life and everyday conversations. So this is just a recap of what we've said already, really. So don't wait for them to come to you. If you notice that their body's changing, try and have those conversations. But it's okay if they feel a little bit awkward and embarrassed and it might not be quite the right time for them. But maybe you could put some books in their room or some leaflets for them to get a bit of information and come and talk to you when they're ready. As I said, they will already learn some of this stuff at school, but it may be that you need to have those conversations with them a bit more before that would take place. And it shouldn't be a one-time conversation. You can have a big conversation, but it shouldn't be the conversation. Using everyday situations to have those conversations. So something you see on TV or something you read in a magazine or see online, etc., can be helpful to have those conversations about growing up, and it should continue as your child grows if you feel you're able to be that person. To help manage awkwardness and ensure it's the right time for these conversations, it's a really good thing to ask your child, is it okay if we have a conversation about puberty? Do you mind if we have a conversation about you growing up? I've noticed that you're experiencing some body changes. Can we have a discussion about that? That's really important. That helps keep them safe and you safe and everyone feel okay and that you know it's the right time to have those conversations. It's important to discuss the physical and emotional changes in puberty before they begin. It helps keep them safe and helps keep children prepared and ready for what's going to happen to them. Often children go through puberty and worry about how they look, and that's perfectly natural. As we talked about before, those kind of social changes, they may change their look or change their friendship groups. Also, they may feel a bit awkward about the physical changes that happen to them. All of those things are perfectly normal and happen to most of us, and it's great if you can be there to guide your child through those changes. So as well as asking your child's permission to have these conversations, it's good to know some communication strategies for when these conversations happen. I often refer back to when my child was a bit younger and going through puberty, or just those teenage years in general. Often we'd have good conversations in the car, so we were kind of facing forward. There wasn't too much eye contact. We both concentrating on the road. I was concentrating on driving, and we could have conversations with a bit of an easier flow and feel a bit less awkward about asking questions. And that worked for us. So that may work for you. Often during an activity is good, so it could be a leisure activity or cooking together or doing something at home, and those conversations may feel a bit easier because it takes the pressure off a little bit if you're already doing an activity. Often it's really, I would say it is important, not often, it is really important to consider feelings. So acknowledge your own feelings and identify your own feelings and support your child to do the same as well. If you're saying something that's your opinion, say in my opinion, unless it is an actual fact. Kids in puberty can get quite annoyed if that's not the case. And speak clearly, and let them know that you are listening. And if it's not the right time, it may be that you're really, really busy, but you really want to give them the attention that they deserve and that they need for asking questions and having conversations. It's okay to say, actually, not right now, I've really got this to do, but this is a really important conversation, so let's come back to this. Let's do this once I've done this. Let's have this conversation tonight. Yeah, have fun with it. It can be fun. It can be funny. You could share stories. You could, use social media or things you see in a soap. There's so many different ways that you could approach these conversations. You might want to have a little notebook. I've known friends that have done that with their children. So their child might write a question, so they may not feel comfortable in verbalising a question, but their child could write a question in a notebook. That notebook is left somewhere safe in the house, and then the parent and carer can write a response or give some answers, and it could go backwards and forwards like that. They could share comments, thoughts, feelings, questions, so that can be a nice option. The use of correct terminology for body parts is really important, and it's actually really important that children learn that from as young as possible. So as soon as they start learning their eye, their elbow, their foot, it's actually really important that they learn the words penis, vagina, vulva, testicles. This helps keep them safe, but it also takes away any shame or embarrassment from body parts, because as we know, they are just body parts. So you can practice if you like. Let's say penis, vagina, vulva, testicles. See, not so bad. And the more you get used to saying them, the less awkward you may feel about saying them. It's actually fine for you to use whatever words you want to use at home, and I've heard many, many different words for genitals, but actually when they're at school, or if you're talking to medical professionals, or where possible, it's really important to use the correct terminology. So while it's important to learn about correct body parts and making sure that children are able to name the correct body parts and use the correct language for those, we also recognise it's important that they learn at the same time that some body parts are private. And the Pantosaurus is a great way to help them do that. So this is a resource from the NSPCC. You can find it easily online. Lots of children will learn about this in school through lessons and assembly, which is amazing. There are parent resources that you can use as well to talk to your children about the privates rule and Pantosaurus rule. So as well as those one-to-one conversations that you may have with your child during puberty and explaining those physical and emotional social changes that they will have, it's important to have family conversations. And I don't mean that you should all sit down as a huge family and talk about puberty, although that's fine if that's something that you wish to do. But things to consider while your children are experiencing those bodily changes. So thinking about privacy. So have they got privacy? This is really important during this time for your children. Thinking about clothing, are there rules around clothing that you'll all, wear certain clothing in the communal areas of your home, but actually in their bedrooms they can go without clothing, and think in terms of things like behaviour, masturbation. Thinking about wording, what wording and phrases will you use throughout puberty for your child, and agreed rules, agreed understanding, and so everyone's on the same page and you can navigate this time together and hopefully make it a bit easier for everybody. On your screen is a list of puberty facts, and these are the things that I would consider, and lots of experts would too, that these are the really important things that your children need to know about puberty. So we've talked a lot about the physical and the emotional changes, and it's important to know for them to know that they will experience both of those things and that it will happen to everyone. So every single adult has experienced puberty as a child, and that can help sometimes relieve that pressure and anxiety and awkward feeling. It can happen at any time, and some changes may happen quickly and some may slow. One key piece of information for children to be aware of is that as soon as they go through puberty, their bodies are able and capable of making a baby. So not always and not for everyone, but in most cases, the onset of puberty means that their bodies could make a baby. Important for them to know that. Yep, so as I said, changes and things can happen quickly or slowly, and everyone is completely different. They may have shot up and be really tall, and their friends feel small, or one of them may have experienced a broken voice and then others not, and one may have larger breasts and whatnot, and all of these changes are, you know, perfectly normal, and it's okay to, you know, have those conversations and try to tell them not to compare, although it's difficult not to compare yourselves to your friends, certainly when you go through puberty, but, you know, to remind them that all of those changes happen at different times for different people. Children will start thinking about sex, so not all children, but often as a result of the hormones that flood their body, they will become sexually aware. They will consider their thoughts and feelings around desire, who they like, who they don't like, what they don't like, and that's okay. And it's important for them to have that space to explore that in an age-appropriate way. You can't stop the changes that happen during puberty. So for most people, puberty is a normal part of growing up, and, you know, those changes won't stop, and that's how they become an adult. So all of those things are, I would say, the key messages for your children to know about the changes that will happen to them during puberty. Thankfully, there are lots of resources to help parents and carers support their children to navigate puberty. The NSPCC is a fantastic resource. There's so many things on there. So guidance documents, resources, top tips, phone lines is fantastic. Childline, again, is amazing. It's a great place for parents to look at, but also for children. Lots of information for children on there. They can ask questions. They can find out what other children are experiencing as well, and support them in that way. Outspoken Sex Ed is a great place to learn about lots of topics to do with growing up around sexual health, puberty, etc. Planet Puberty is another one. So yeah, lots of resources. Google puberty for parents, you'll find lots of stuff, but these ones here I would say are quality assured, and we know that they are providing safe and relevant information and guidance for parents around puberty. Books are a fantastic way of approaching the subject of puberty, body changes, and growing up in general. So on your screen you'll see a variety of books there, again, that are quality assured, that provide good, safe messages for children and can be read with children, or you can read them yourselves and give them to children to read. But yeah, lots of great books there. You can find lots of those online and in local bookshops, or even your local libraries. Medway libraries are great and have a huge range of books to support parents and children. I do a lot of puberty and growing up talks within schools, and talk to parents about relationships and sex education. And within any of those talks, I always recommend the Amaze website. It's free to access. There are tons of videos on there, so animated videos that are suitable for children and for adults to look at to inform them and to maybe watch with their children. So they are listed by category, they're listed by age, so you can see what's age appropriate information for your child, or you can search by topic if they've asked a particular question. But yeah, really great free to access website. So the Child Health team have put together a series of support sheets. So for each of our sessions, we have a set of resource sheets available for Medway parents and carers. This one on puberty is available, so lots of information and guidance on puberty and growing up, some questions that your children might ask and some potential answers that you might give, as well as websites and books and things like that that may be helpful to you during this time. If you would like to access any of the support sheets for any of our sessions, you can email the team at the email address on the screen. So childhealth@medway.gov.uk. This brings us to the end of this recorded session, and I'd like to say a big thank you for joining me. I hope that it's been informative and useful. I hope that you've learnt something and that you feel encouraged and empowered to have conversations with your children around puberty and growing up. And please remember, if you have any questions at all about puberty and growing up, or anything around child health, if we can help you, we will as a team. So please get in touch. Again, the email address is there on the screen. So childhealth@medway.gov.uk. And again, thank you so much for joining me for this session.